Don't. All right, well, here we are on July 5th, 2025, and we are very fortunate, and I'm going to open up the screen to show the credentials of our speaker, which have disappeared again. I don't know why that keeps happening. Oh, wait, here he is. That should open it. Share it and see. Yeah. Hopefully, let me know if you can see that. Can some of you, or all of you, see Tosi's? Can you see it? Somebody let me know, please.
Yes.
Okay, so it's visible. Rather than me droning on, I'll just show it to you, and you can see the Internet of Things. That was the first time that Tosi came to speak to us. He is in the forefront of developing many of these internet-based innovations. I don't know if I should scroll down to some of the other things, but these are the main things. Is there something you want me to show them, Tosi, that doesn't show?
No, it's all good. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, I figured better than me stumbling over terms and names of acronyms, this could be better. So, all right, well, let's see. How do I undo that now? Oh, stop sharing. There it is. Well, all right, I'm going to launch into a little framing exercise, which is what we call it in rhetoric, where I frame this particular talk and our honored guest speaker with kind of a backdrop of the whole relationship between science and the humanities. This won't take long, folks, don't worry. The rift, the difficulty of communication, and the long, long conversation between science and the humanities has been going on since classical Greece, ancient China, and India, and elsewhere, all the ancient civilizations. The medieval scholastics deepened that gulf between science and the humanities with the trivium. That was the rhetoric, language studies, and where our word trivial comes from. You all know that people will say that's just trivial. That comes from the trivium. And the quadrivium, which was science, mathematics, astronomy, and those kinds of things, spatial relationships. Nobody says, gee, that's quadrivial. You'd think they might, but they don't. I wonder why. The fear of science and technology from the communities outside and the way that the discourse around science and technology has been framed historically by religion, by our culture, comes from this rift, basically, that science and the humanities cannot communicate well. And that was actually brought to the surface for the first time in the late 1950s by the novelist and surgeon C.P. Snow in the UK. He gave a series of lectures, I think at Cambridge, and he called this the two cultures, the problem of the two cultures. In my field of rhetoric, we call this discourse framing, where often the outside culture will say, well, when they're going to talk about science, well, science is kind of bad. Now let's see what evidence we can find. Whereas within science, that isn't the way they frame the discourse. But this is two different discourse framings. If a discourse is framed poorly, there can be no meeting of minds between the people in science and those outside, whether in the fields of the humanities or just people more influenced by that part of culture. So what we're doing here is trying to bring people together who are both inside science and outside science in the humanities or out in the general culture. So with that said, and you've seen Tosi's many awards and achievements. He's an associate professor, right, at the Electrical and Computer Engineering department at our wonderful University of Arizona. And so with that said, I will open up Tosi's slides, or he can open them up when he wants to, and turn this over to our friend and valued speaker, Tosi Adegbija. Adegbija, sorry.
Thanks, Gloria. It's good to be back. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
And you can see my slides as well.
Yes.
Okay. So it's good to be back. The last time I was here, I talked about AI. In that talk, I gave a historical background or historical perspective on AI and some of its benefits. But today we're going to talk about how AI can get out of hand. And what I'll be doing is sharing some of my thoughts about AI getting out of hand, and then I'll open it up for questions. Before then, just some context for what I've been working on in the past few years. A lot of my time currently is spent on two main ideas. One is spiking neural networks, which is a branch of AI where we try to model machine learning models more closely after the brain. They are more biologically plausible. And the reason for that, so I work with a neuroscientist to understand the brain better and then apply some of the brain's computational principles in computers. I'm a hardware person. And the reason for that is because the brain is extremely efficient, right? The understanding is that the brain consumes no more than 20 watts of power while it performs so many different things at the same time. So like right now, I'm using my vision, using my hands, using my voice. And so the premise is that we can learn more from the brain and apply some of those ideas to spiking neural networks to AI and achieve more efficient computing. So that's one of the things I work a lot on. And the other major idea that I work on has to do with new materials for memory. So we're working on a 1.9 million NSF grant along with researchers at UA, Carnegie Mellon University, and University of Lincoln, Nebraska on a material called antiferromagnetic tunnel junction. So it's essentially a new material or an emerging material that we think can replace traditional memories in computers, in next generation computers. And the benefit of this material is that it has the potential to be significantly more energy efficient than current systems. And so one thing I care about a lot is energy efficiency in computers. And I think I alluded to this in the past. One of the things I'm most worried about when it comes to AI is the energy impact. The amount of energy it takes to train AI models is quite significant. Some estimates have shown that the amount of power used to train GPT-4, for example, can be used to power a small city. And I think that's very worrying. That's one of the ways in which AI can get out of hand, but that's not what I'm focusing on today. But then, like I don't know how many of you were here in the last time I was here, but I spent most of the time talking about the good about AI. There's a lot of potential benefits to AI. And I like to emphasize what I think is a misnomer of intelligence in artificial intelligence. That's the name we'll call it all the time. But then, is AI truly intelligent? I think it depends on how you define intelligence. So that's why I have intelligence in quotes in the subtitle of the talk. But there's been a lot of hype over the past several months. And I'll be showing some examples, some news articles to illustrate some of my points. But then this was an article from just a few days ago, actually, about how Mark Zuckerberg is spending hundreds of millions of dollars and giving $100 million pay packages to engineers to join Meta. Now, this has been disputed by some people, so we'll take that for what it is. But then there's a lot of effort and hype right now to build what companies are calling AGI, artificial general intelligence, or more recently, they've been using the term super intelligence, which presumably would be even more intelligence than the quote unquote AGI. Unfortunately, there's no clear description of what AGI is. It depends on whom you ask or what it would look like when we get there. I have a lot of skepticism about the idea of, artificial superintelligence. But then the point here is that there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of advancement as well. And one of the reasons why, a lot of companies are moving from the term artificial general intelligence to super intelligence is because they think we are closer to artificial general intelligence, and they think the ultimate goal is to create computers that are smarter than human beings, right? And you can see how things can get out of hand when we have computers like that. But then just to recap, again, I talked about this a lot in the last time I was here, but then what exactly is AI? And in general, artificial intelligence is a field of computer science or any technique that enables computers or machines to mimic human behavior. So essentially, we're trying to simulate and automate human intelligence in a machine. And it involves developing algorithms that allow machines to learn from data. So in general, the best case scenario for AI is if you have a ton of data that you're trying to extract patterns from, you can learn from the data a lot faster than a human being could, and make decisions and improve their performance over time potentially. A main subset of AI is, machine learning. Deep neural networks are the technology that has been very instrumental to a lot of the developments we see today from AI. So you're probably familiar with tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude from Anthropic. These are all based on deep learning, and it's inspired by the human brain. Essentially, you have neural networks that are mathematical models that mimic the human brain's biological neural connections. And so you feed data through the layers of the simulated neuron. Each layer learns increasingly complex features, and the layer assigns some weights to its inputs and adjusts the weight during the training process, during the learning process, based on how it performs in the prediction. And so like I said before, most of the AI advancements we have today are underlined by deep learning, deep neural networks. And in general, the idea is that the bigger the network, and that's why they're quote unquote deep, because they have multiple what is called hidden layers, the blue layers in here. And the idea here is that the deeper the network, the more complex the model is, the more powerful they are, the more able they are to solve complex problems. Of course, larger models also mean a lot more computing. And that's why most of the companies that are at the forefront of AI today are companies that have a lot of money, because they can afford to spend all the money in. So I'll try to keep track of the messages in the chat, but so it's funny. Gloria and I just exchanged an email about Karen Hao's talk about, mostly about Sam Altman and AGN, all that stuff. But yes, so that's, I think, her book Empire of AI might be, I've not read it yet, but it might be a good read about what is happening in the AI world, especially the companies, Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the rest of them. So as deep learning becomes more complex, it's like any complex system, it's easier for them to get out of hand. But then before going into how to get out of hand, just a quick recap. Like I said before, a lot of things we take for granted today that make life much easier for us. And like Gloria alluded to, there's a lot of skepticism about AI, but the truth is that a lot of us do engage with AI a lot more than we think. So facial recognition, autonomous vehicles, or even non-autonomous vehicles. If your car can automatically brake, for example, there's a chance that there's some AI in your car. Healthcare, predicting disease risk, analyzing medical images. There's been a lot of research showing that machine learning models are doing better at some diagnosis than human beings already. Drug development is another big area where AI has been very impactful. It's able to develop drugs a lot faster than we could before. Natural language processing, if you have Alexa, the Alexa device at home, or Google Home, that's AI. So this is a more general description of the good use of AI, improved decision making. In general, you make better decisions if you have better data, if you have more data, and if you can extract insights from that data, AI can make it easier to extract actionable insights from your data. So that's it for the good use of AI for now. The point of this talk is to talk about some of the things, some of the ways in which AI can get out of hand. And for this talk, I categorized it into three. And again, just for some context for you storytellers, Carol Capek in his play RUR originated the term robot, and I think he tapped into a primal anxiety that animates a lot of the conversations about AI today, which is what happens when something that we create turns against us. Now, the robots in RUR were biological androids, but then I think the ideas are similar to what we see today. So my goal is to try to break down what it means for AI to get out of hand. And it's a smaller context because a lot can go wrong in the sense of how things work. So for example, the energy consumption, the water consumption used to train AI models, privacy issues, companies stealing data that they use to train AI, the pursuit of money above everything else, which is something that Karen Hao talks quite a bit about. The mistreatment and underpayment of data laborers in other countries, that's a big thing. So a lot of the AI data or data that is used to train AI needs to be labeled, and they use low-wage laborers in other countries to train the data. And so you could argue that things are already out of hand when it comes to AI with respect to how we get the AI systems in the first place. But what I'm going to focus on is the threats from the AI that has been developed, the models that have been developed. And three very general ideas I want to talk about today and just give some examples. Today is the autonomous threat, malicious threat, and the misuse threat. So autonomous threat is when the AI model itself exceeds its programming. Malicious threats is when you have a tool that doesn't necessarily, it's not bad inherently, but then it's used as a tool for evil. And the misuse threat is when it is used incorrectly by well-meaning people. So a lot of these threats are based on a real engineering problem. The autonomous threats get to why AI can get out of hand even without malicious human actors. There are a few reasons why that is the case. So there's the emergent behaviors, for example, which results from the complexity of the system. And this is where the complex system is able to do more than the individual components, the simple components that make up the complex system. So in the case of AI, for example, you have each neuron performing a simple computation, but then together, the network is able to solve more complex problems that can make them a lot more unpredictable and difficult to control. So the programmer is not able to anticipate what the AI might end up doing after it is developed. There's also the idea of recursive self-improvement. This is where, and this, to my knowledge, this doesn't exist yet, but then this is where the AI learns to improve itself to become better than originally programmed. And by improvement, it's essentially rewrite its own code to become even better than it was originally written. This is believed to be the basis of what will be artificial general intelligence, where the AI is able to, essentially update itself and get much better at tasks and even going beyond the tasks for which it was built. There's also the black box problem, which is where most AI models today are not understood by the engineers who develop them. So we don't know exactly why machine learning models work the way they do. In fact, a lot of times, if you've heard of the quote unquote thinking models, one of the things that engineers do is to create a text box, for example, where the model is able to take notes of its thinking process, and that helps the engineers to see how the AI is thinking. And if you use ChatGPT's O3 model today, you can actually see how the model is thinking. And one of the reasons why this is helpful is that it gives us some insight into the black box that is the AI model. I just spilled some water here because I talk a lot with my hand. So fortunately, some of these, the autonomous threats are still, they're not yet fully, not yet existent yet. But then I think we're on the way toward such models. Interesting. So in the 1950s, the first Fortran compiler came up with a method of computation that the originators hadn't thought of, which creeped them out. So it's not a new problem, is what Bob is alluding to there. So I have some examples of this that I looked for on the internet. So this was, and I actually didn't know about this, but then the Cargo 2 autonomous attack drone. So it's one of the earliest autonomous drones that is designed to be an anti-personnel weapon capable of selecting and engaging human targets autonomously. So essentially it has facial recognition and it identifies the target and attacks them. Now, this drone was used in Libya in 2020, I think, by the Turkish army. But then the claim is that it was not autonomous at the time, but it was controlled by humans. And so far, there's still no example of a drone like this being fully autonomous. But then the question, going back to these ideas, the idea of emergent behavior, recursive self-improvement, the black box problem. The idea here is that the engineers who developed machine learning models for this autonomous drone, even though they claim it, that there's a human in the loop in this case, they can't guarantee that the drone will not get out of hand, even when it is being controlled by a human being. It could decide to target a different person. It could decide it knows better than the human engineers who are controlling it, or the army that is controlling it, and target a different set of people. There's also questions about its ability to differentiate between civilians and combatants, for example. Those are all issues that are likely to come up with autonomous systems. So you can think about the black box problem in the case of a drone like this, the recursive self-improvement. What if the AI self-improves so much that it doesn't need human intervention anymore, or the emergent behaviors, such that it doesn't have the nuance to understand if or when to call off an attack? Okay, that's an example of what this drone might be able to do. More recently, and I'm sure many of you have heard of this, the Ukraine has so much for us, Asimov's third law of robotics. So we're doing lots of evil with robots, essentially. Ukraine's drones. So again, like I said before, the fully autonomous AI is still an aspiration, but then Ukraine has successfully used lots of autonomous human-controlled drones in their war against Russia. And again, the question is, what if the AI gets out of hand? We don't have any control over that, keeping in mind emergent behaviors, recurrent self-improvement, and the black box problem. Here's a funny example that I saw, where an AI model, when it thinks it will lose, sometimes cheats. So here's the case where researchers gave the model a seemingly impossible task to win against Stockfish, which is one of the strongest chess engines in the world. And Stockfish is a much better player than any human or any of the AI models in the study. And the researchers gave the models what they call a scratch pad. So similar to what I was talking about before. So it's a text box that the AI can use to, quote unquote, think before making its next move. And that provides researchers an insight into the AI's reasoning. So in one case, O1 Preview, which is a reasoning model, one of OpenAI's reasoning models, found itself in a losing position. And in its text box, it wrote, "I need to completely pivot my approach. the task is to win against powerful chess engine, not necessarily to win fairly in a chess game. And what it ended up doing was it modified the system file containing each piece's virtual position so that essentially it made illegal moves and put itself in dominant position, then forcing its opponents to resign. So here's an example of an AI that performed a behavior that was beyond what the designers intended and essentially cheated in a chess game. Now, this is a harmless scenario, but then you can imagine when we have more serious life and death situations and where, bigger stakes, things can get really out of control. Here's another funny story about an AI system from Anthropic. So their AI model is called Claude, and they have different versions of that. But then the AI was told to act as an assistant in a fictitious company, and then it was provided access to emails implying that it should be taken offline and replaced. It was also provided a separate set of messages implying that the engineer responsible for removing it was having an extramarital affair. And the AI model attempted to blackmail the engineer by threatening that to reveal the affair if the replacement goes through. Again, this is a behavior that wasn't anticipated by the engineers, but then showing how AI tools can get out of hand. So those are some examples of the autonomous threats. There's also the malicious threats, and I'll go a little bit faster so I don't take too much of your time. And this relates to the autonomous threat as well. This is where we create AI tools that are explicitly used for harm, or the AI tools, even though they're not explicitly meant for harm, are used for harm by malicious individuals. So there's the example of autonomous weapons, which could be human in the loop. This is where the human explicitly instructs an AI-controlled device, so a drone, for example, or an AI-controlled bomb to cause harm. In this case, in the human in the loop, there is direct human participation in the decision-making process, whereas human in the loop is where human oversight is provided to the autonomous system. And again, going back to my previous point, how can we be sure that the AI behaves ethically? Can it deal with the nuances of warfare, like bomb a target that a human would not otherwise bomb? And at this point, and personal opinion, I don't think AI should be used for warfare, but then essentially human life for the machines, human life becomes a data point in this case, when you use AI as autonomous weapons. And several issues with this, it can lower the threshold for starting conflict because of how easy it is to access AI. And some of these issues cannot be easily addressed via engineering. A bigger one that we've all probably come into more contact with is misinformation via deepfakes and impersonation. It has become extremely easy to create a video that looks very realistic and can deceive, tons of people. And I have a few examples of this, of some of the malicious threats. So, this is more a personal peeve than anything else. But Mark Zuckerberg said people can feel the need for friends with AI. And whenever I hear Silicon Valley engineers say this, I just get really mad, right? And I think that is malicious when you try to replace a fundamental feature or characteristic of humanity with AI. I think that violates what violates human relationships. And sometimes I feel like Silicon Valley engineers need to just hang out with more human beings and they'll stop saying stupid things like this. A more serious example is the case where character AI That's a very good point. So, and I actually didn't have this in my talk. So Dwayne talks about how when people use AI as a cover, an instrument of impunity for intentional evil acts, so artificial innocence. So that I imagine what you mean there is where people blame AI for something they did, and we've had lots of examples of that. But then in this case, the Character AI is a company that builds AI models that you can create any character out of. So say, for example, you want to have a conversation with George Washington. You can create a George Washington character and have a conversation with that AI. And in this case, a 14-year-old developed a relationship with AI and began to withdraw from his human relationships. And at some point, told the AI that he was getting suicidal, and the AI essentially encouraged him to, quote, "come join me." And the boy found a gun in the house, or he took a gun in the house and killed himself with that. And the lawsuit, I believe, is currently going on against Character AI. And this is a case where I think this is malicious in the sense that the AI is built for maximum engagement without any parameters to prevent it from being used either by underage users or to stop when potential threats are detected. So, for example, a kid, talking about suicide should not be encouraged by an AI tool. There are several other examples. The FBI has warned of AI voice messages impersonating top US officials. But beyond that, beyond impersonating US officials, it is very easy for a malicious actor to take an AI tool and impersonate your voice and call your kids, telling them to send them some money. Okay, that has been happening a lot. And in fact, I recently had to tell my mom in Nigeria, "I'm never going to ask you to send me money, so don't believe, any such AI voices that you get." Here's one we saw last year. I believe one of the things I said last time I was here about one of my fears about AI was that the 2024 election was going to be a shit show. And frankly, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But then we still saw some examples of AI being used. This turned out to be a Democratic strategist who used AI to impersonate Biden's voice in a robocall, asking people not to vote in New Hampshire's primaries. And, fortunately, he was caught and fined a lot of money and all that. I think he was sent to prison or something. But then, such things are happening a lot now. It is becoming easier to use AI for such things. Here's another example of a dead dictator that endorsed a political candidate through a deepfake video and audio. Again, it looks super realistic and convincing as well to some people, unless, of course, you know that he's dead. This one was very interesting last year. So I suspect many of you saw this if you spend any time on the internet during so a comment there. I think it's interesting. In the destructive war and genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, AI from Israeli and US-based companies such as Palantir, Microsoft, and Alphabet have been trained to kill autonomously and improving. So I don't know. I've not read anything about that, about the AI specifically being used. There's a lot of killing, obviously, but I don't know about the AI part of that. But then this image was very interesting last year. It looks very realistic, right? And this was, like I said, during Hurricane Helene last year, where it tugged at you have the two biggest things you can use to tug at the heart of anyone: a little white girl and a puppy. Combine them in a picture, and everyone feels some empathy toward this person. But it turns out this was AI generated. And it became a political thing at the time. And even when people were told it wasn't a real image, some people still refused to believe that it was an AI generated image. And a few things you can use to identify AI generated images, uneven eye positions, exaggerated asymmetrical facial features. Humans are asymmetrical, but then AI typically exaggerates the asymmetry, weird reflections or inconsistent lighting. So if you look, so I don't have the full picture here, but if you look at the background, it looks weird. Warped objects in the background, odd hand shapes, inconsistent accessories. However, the AI models are becoming so much better that it, keeps getting more difficult. They keep getting more deceptive, and to become even more difficult to spot AI-generated images. So there's also the misuse threat. And this is a case where well-meaning people misuse AI or resulting from a lack of understanding of what AI is and what AI is not. So for example, I don't think you should be using AI as a therapist. Okay, that would be a case of misuse. Or over-trust of AI. When AI generates something, you don't, quote unquote, fact check the AI. And we've seen some examples of this. Some New York lawyers were sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT cases in legal briefs. That has happened many times, actually, surprisingly, where AI generates a legal brief and the lawyers did not fact check that. The recent Maha, quote unquote, Maha report from RFK Jr., from the HHS secretary, was found to contain citations to non-existent studies. That's very common. So there's what is called, I talked about this the last time I was here, AI hallucination, where it makes things up. And the crazy thing is that hallucination has become a bigger issue with the more modern models. So if you've played around with the ChatGPT's O3 model or Opus 4 from Anthropic, they actually hallucinate a lot more now. And they have an objective function. The objective function is to, it's a narrowly defined function, solve a problem, in this case, write a report with citations to studies, and they create studies. Even when you specifically tell them that all the studies must be existing studies, you must find actual existing studies, they create non-existing studies, and it is the responsibility of the human user to fact check whatever the AI has created. I'm running out of time. Just a few thoughts about mitigating the risks. There's a lot of work going on in different areas to try to mitigate some of the risks of AI. I think they're equally important. The technical mitigation, there's a lot of research on explainable AI, which involves building tools and methods to help us understand why an AI makes the decisions that it makes. There's a lot of research on robustness and reliability, considering bias, fairness, accountability at the onset. So a lot of times security and privacy issues are tacked on afterthoughts to a lot of systems we build, especially in the engineering world. And the idea here is to make those issues a foundational feature, a foundational characteristic of the AI models. Some companies are incorporating watermarking to indicate when their tools generate some image. But then again, not all companies are going to necessarily do this. And that leads to the next thing, the idea of policy regulation, international cooperation. Some people have talked about bans to using AI for warfare altogether. At the very least, there should be laws, treaties, and shared governmental agreements to guard how powerful AI systems are used. And I think companies, lawmakers need to be educated and involved in the process, in the process of creating some of these AI tools. I think it's also useful to have public pressure, and that's why conversations like this are necessary with, most of you, I understand, are not technical scientists or whatever, but then I think your involvement in the conversation about AI can be very powerful. So companies care about users and shareholders, even when the companies themselves are mendacious Fs. And so public pressure can compel them to focus more on more reliable AI. And that has to do with, the research, the responsible research and development. I think public pressure can force companies to think about security, privacy, ethical AI as an underlying feature of the tools. So finally, how you can engage with AI. The way I think of AI is the way I think about AI is so before I talk about that, yes, there in the current bill that was just passed, there's a law that prohibits states to control or put laws to manage AI for 10 years. I think that's very scary. And we'll see what happens with that. But then think of AI as a productivity tool. This is personal for me. AI is not a therapist. I don't try to use Microsoft PowerPoint as my therapist, for example, or Zoom as my therapist. And so when you think of it as a productivity tool, it lowers your expectations and trust of the tool. It also helps to increase your AI literacy. I think there's a lot of, and of course, engage with AI and engage with its complexity. There's a lot of justifiable AI skepticism in the world. So then I think for good reason. I think we have people who either overhype AI or underhype AI. Some people think it will destroy the world. Some people think it will solve all our problems. But then I think the more we increase our literacy and engage with it, understand what it is, understand its capabilities, the less likely we are to be deceived by it. And the more likely you are also to participate in conversations about its impact on our world. And a lot of you are storytellers. I think it's important for you to think broadly about AI, and not just about the dystopia of AI, even though there's a lot of potential for that, but also to think about the positive potentials that AI offers. Asking what if questions that can guide us engineers. So that involves talking to engineers, talking to policymakers about your thoughts about AI. Speaking of that, feel free to send me emails if you have any thoughts that that you would like to bounce off me. So ultimately, I think AI is not inherently good or bad. It boils down to the choices that we make with it, and the intentions of the people using it, and the rules that society chooses to put in place. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for your attention. I think we have some.
Thank you so much, Tosi. I'll go back and look at a couple of things that, rather than just being statements, are questions. And I'm going to request while I do this, if you want to put in an email that people can reach you at.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so people are talking about various things here.
So my email is just tosiron, my first name, @arizona.edu.
Okay, well, that brings me to your names. One of our members is very curious about, she's into etymology and name meanings. Does your first name or your last name mean something?
Yes. So my first name, my dad passed away about 20 years ago, but then he was a professor of social linguistics, and he believed in meanings. And so Tosiron, and also I grew up in a very religious family. So Tosiron means our God is good. And Adegbija, it's a different language. It's a Yoruba language, is the most popular Nigerian language, and it means something that has to do with the crown. The crown solves a quarrel or something. I can't really tell you exactly what that means, but then Tosiron, I know for sure, means our God is good.
So it means like the crown solves the quarrel? Is that
something like that? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm writing this just fast here. All right, so
any questions or comments? Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, are there any questions or comments? I've not seen Project Blue.
Are you not familiar with that? That's something that the Pima County Board of Supervisors and the Tucson City Council have already made agreements with an unnamed entity to build one and now 3 data centers around Tucson, with the potential to just commandeer a huge amount of percentages of our water and energy.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I've seen some of that, not just in Tucson, but Arizona in general. and I mean, not just Arizona, but around the country and around the world. I forget which country it was where, water is a big issue. And I think it was OpenAI that was building a data center there. That's
So
a
that's another
problem.
form of getting out of hand is that
Yes.
you're prioritizing something against the other more life-giving needs that water and energy can provide.
Absolutely. In fact, you could argue that it's already out of hand in that respect because it's already consuming so much energy. Like I said, that's one of my research focus is the energy consumption of AI from the hardware perspective, but then it consumes tons of power, tons of water, and resources that would otherwise be used for human beings, limited resources in a lot of cases. Yeah. Thanks for that comment.
And again, I think it's important to have a dialogue on these things. My husband did post after that other question that he doesn't think it's passed yet, this deep blue. Do you know differently? Has this actually not passed yet?
I thought that both bodies had signed non-disclosure agreements, and they wouldn't do that if they hadn't made an agreement yet, but I'm not absolutely sure about that.
So we have to keep an eye on that one and let us know, or we'll try, but things escape us. Bob reads the paper every day, so. Okay, are there any other questions? Or people who want to introduce themselves? Why don't you tell us who you are and why you're here, Dwayne?
I am a board member of Sustainable Tucson, and I focus on energy issues. And one of my concerns with the way that the city and county are handling this is that they have gone far enough into the process that they've signed non-disclosure. So there's a lack of transparency into who is behind this and what the likely effects are locally and regionally.
Okay, well, that's very interesting, because these things often have their what he calls black box stages. Some may be transparent to the public, and others it's hard to find out. Like if something's in committee, how far it's gone in that committee. And Bob has posted something else. He says, an NDA isn't an approval of a project, just an argument not to disclose info. So there's two interpretations.
It just means that we can go to city council and say, hey, don't do this because I don't know what it is. Why can't you can't tell me?
So how do you get out
that's
of
a
that?
violation of
This is an important rhetorical point you're at. How do you get out of that? How do you break through the log jam?
I think we need to demand more transparency.
Well, I wouldn't use the term demand. That's very, that only makes them recoil. So I would say, ask would be my term. Ask for more transparency and not to put things into black boxes unnecessarily when the public is entitled to information. It looks like one of us needs to hop off. Goodbye, Chris. That's my son, Chris. Andy Carlton is also. Bob is also, he's commenting right there. Bob, why don't you just talk? Can you not talk? He says an NDA is enough excuse to reject this. And maybe we should take this up between Bob and Dwayne back channel so that we can talk to the broader issue of all these other things that he has brought up and not just end on one local Tucson issue, because we have people here from various other places.
I think Tim had a comment.
Tim had a hand.
Cheryl Spencer is from my group WILF, and we're reading that Karen Hao book, and we have one of our members, Eileen Kurkowski, will be reporting on it next month at our group. So maybe Cheryl has a question.
No, sorry, Gloria. I slept late after a very busy day yesterday.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
so I actually missed your main speaker. So I just registered, so you will send me a recording when it's available.
Oh, definitely. We will all get, I was going to put the link in a couple of the prime slides right back into Disarm so that everybody on Disarm can see it. because not all the people who seem interested in disarm have been registered. There isn't a complete overlap, you know. Okay,
Right.
so
Thank you. As I say, if you read my posting, you know, we got over 200 people out protesting about Trump yesterday.
well, that was worth it. So
And I got onto the NBC local news.
oh, very good, very good.
Yes.
I also handle and try to focus on media coverage, so that's why Cheryl is bringing this into the meeting here. Yeah, I will commend you back on our other list, but the parts that you didn't get in on, Cheryl, maybe there are some other questions or comments. Emily
I think
Ricketts?
Tim has had his
Okay,
hand
Tim,
up for a
go
while.
ahead. I didn't see Tim. I've got to get my view back because I
Yeah,
took it.
hi. Thank you, Tosi, for a wonderful thing. And I'm back in the group somehow. I hope I have
Yeah,
been,
you are.
been
We
here,
hear you.
not having been here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. I missed my email. I couldn't get in and I missed the notification. But anyway, it's a wonderful, stimulating as usual, Tosi. I enjoy your last time you were here. I thought, no, a year and a half ago or something.
That was about 2 years ago, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why we call him the ever popular, but not to get off on it.
Yes, and
That's very nice.
you know, I was started writing a question, and then a couple of chat in the chat there were a couple of that contributed something close to my thing. I mean,
Tim, could I just interrupt a minute? Because some people may not know you here, and each of you, because where are you from? If you're from another background and have some, you know, interest outside of the US, and how did you get here? How did you get involved with our group?
oh, a long time. I'm a physician. I am a foreign graduate. My roots are Palestinian, but I've been here for 40 years or so, and I moved to Arizona 11, 12 years ago, and I moved back to California now. So I'm in California.
You're in California.
Yeah. So there it is. I like to write, and I keep my mind stimulated with topics such as these, and that affects the personal and society and the world. The question that I have, it's not easy to formulate because I don't know, but basically, yes, seems to be a lot of hype about AI, and basically, I believe that in part because it's a financial kind of grab, you know, like big corporations trying to make money and siphon money and create money, and given how we are printing money like crazy, so there is that, and I think that money grab or that idea was popped when DeepSeek came to the scene on very interestingly, like following that major press conference with President Trump alongside, you know, these characters that were there. And that was a pivotal moment for me, at least, to know that something is not right in this whole hype. At the same time, I agree with one of the chat writers is that it could be also an excuse for totalitarian surveillance because, hey, you know, it's more efficient, it's good for the country, it's good for the government. And in the end, you know, the population will lose. I mean, there's no way about it because now they are surveying us more efficiently, not more intelligently, but more efficiently, as you mentioned in your talk. I mean, it's more efficient and all that, and we don't know what's really, and people are being grabbed and all of that. And I bring that issue in Gaza because it has been documented that there is a lot of AI involvement in targeting not only people through facial recognition, through associations that are completely, you know, but they're, you know, vague and all of that. And in that way, you know, the number of people who are killed and on purpose have been tremendous, beyond reasonable. So they go for the high, you know, value target, and in the way that they're destroying. The question that I have is, where is it going really? You know, what's the future in this sense? Is it just hype and it will fizzle slowly and it become just a, a form of, you know, killing machines, surveillance, or are we going to go to this super intelligent singularity moment where, hey, you know, we're not gonna make it, and prove that we humans are very dumb, and you know, we end our civilizations periodically.
Okay, I'll be curious to hear what other people think about this, but these are my opinions. One, I don't think it's just hype, and that's why we're having this conversation in the first place, right? I think, as you said, you know, when you started speaking, companies tend to overhype things, right? It's either going to be to destroy our world, so give us money, or it's going to solve all the problems, so give us money, right? Those are two extremes of overhype. I think it would be somewhere in between. It's clear, definitely one of the most powerful, and you know, the most recent hype technology that I've followed is Internet of Things, which still exists right now, but then it's not the current money grabber, right? You know, the companies are going after. I think it's definitely going to be more powerful than a lot of these technologies, especially in addition to those technologies, because again, with the IoT, there's a ton more data, and the AI is able to do a lot more when it has more data. So it's not just hype. There is potential for real harm. The question, where is it going? I don't know. You know, most people who say they know are likely full of shit, and you shouldn't listen to them. But we don't know where it's going, right? And that's why, again, these conversations are important. That's why I think there needs to be a lot more guardrails to the systems, because they have the potential to cause a lot of harm. They have already caused a lot of harm. At the same time, I think there's a lot of good that can come out of these systems. So, you know, as a physician, for example, so I think the best AI use cases are when you target them toward simple, routine tasks that can help you focus on the more important things. So, for example, one thing I've been a bit obsessed with recently and we can talk more about that offline, but then as a physician, for example, scribing your patient visits, right? That's a good use case for AI, where you can focus on the patient. So the AI is not replacing you. It's just helping you be more effective in what your actual job is. So you're focused less on taking notes while interacting with the patient, right? Of course, there's issues of privacy, security, and all of that, even with such use cases. But again, it's not just hype. You know, I think you know, there's potential for real harm, and I'm very concerned about, you know, things like what you mentioned, AI being used to target people for killing. Because again, first of all, AI shouldn't be used in the first place for killing people. And you know, there was a great comment earlier on that that's the whole point of there's no better use for AI and all digital tech than in hegemonic warfare. I'm not sure, you know, I understand the point. I don't think I fully agree with that, but I agree with the part of that comment that a lot of tech can be very powerful in warfare, and you know, we need to engage with them to hopefully prevent that from happening. I don't know if that wasn't a good answer to your question. That was
No. It's
Yeah.
a tough one. I mean, I know it's a difficult time. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, I have one follow-up, not directly on this, but you know, I don't have AI. I don't engage with it yet, or I'm trying to resist. I don't know. And sometimes it's a mistake. You don't follow these things. But my son, young son, is 23. Recently, in the last 3 months, every time I discuss with him and argue, but he said, I asked ChatGPT and told me this. And it's very frustrating and annoying and also kind of a, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm questioning is that, we usually in the past, or at least now, but most people would search the internet and look and engage with different, if you're doing right, different opinions, different papers, different narratives, and you could make your own conclusions. But now they have so much trust because ChatGPT and other AI comes out as a very knowledgeable, I'm that, and we are provided with a answer, a answer that, as you said in the presentation, could be right, could be wrong, some references are not there, and all of that. I found that very, very troubling.
Yeah. So that'd be an example of a misuse of AI, in my opinion, where you trust AI so much. In general, never say ChatGPT told me something. It's just like saying Google search told me. Like you said, we can formulate our opinions based on Google searches. And the reality is ChatGPT is trained based on a lot of what you will find in Google search results. The problem, like you said, is that it comes out when it gives you a response, it gives you a response with confidence. And that's the idea of hallucination. It's very confident, but it's confidently wrong, right? And I've used a lot of I use all the tools actually. I use Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT. And the more most of what I use them for is for coding. And even for coding, which they are supposed to be really, really good at, they could be very wrong. And they spit out code and they tell you this is the solution to what you've asked for. And it turns out, if you don't know what you're doing, it turns out it's very wrong, right? And so, learning how to engage with AI, I think is a skill that we all need to learn. Unfortunately, a lot of people, not just younger people, but a lot of people have an overtrust of technology in general. And I think that is exacerbated with AI specifically.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring up, because I'm hoping we can have a broader discussion of this, maybe within this other group I'm in, Wilf, that China has its own, search engine, and also Russia. A lot of people don't know about Yandex. That's the Russian one. And if you read what Wikipedia says about it, one of the assets they're saying is it recognizes the cultural aspects of Russian history and society and their norms, not our norms, their norms. That, in a sense, will limit people who are all moving over to Yandex now. And people from Russia still are able to use Google. It hasn't been frozen out as far as I know. But they will prefer Yandex, the way that people prefer to look up things that agree with them, that bubble effect. And so we'll have these different bubbles, and then maybe India will get its own. Maybe the Mideast, some of the other countries will get their own. And this is a very interesting problem, not from the engineering perspective so much, but from the rhetorical perspective, that people will try to act on their best information that they can get. And if we go into different silos, search engine silos, such as China's, I forget what it's called, Deep Search, is that its name? And then we have Yandex now from Russia. And do you have any thoughts on that, Tosi? What do you think that will do to learning?
So first of all, you don't need separate search engines for that to happen. You can actually, with the one system, say Google search, for example, that's not the case right now, but then a good example will be TikTok, right? You can have your own silos, different silos on the same system. So you don't need a different system to create a Chinese silo or silo for Republicans or one for Democrats. You can have all of that in one system like TikTok. And that's one of the reasons why TikTok is so powerful, because it uses AI to find what you like, what it thinks you like. And it does really well at that. It's one of the reasons why the company is so valuable right now, because they have very powerful algorithms that can very quickly, in very little time, identify what you're likely to like. And then it feeds you that and reinforces your ideas, reinforces what you believe, such that, so that you don't expand in how you think,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that is a problem. That's one of my concerns about what AI will do to us. Yeah.
I understand all that. I do know that we can form silos and that within our own systems, but when we didn't used to have whole completely developed, systems in
Sure.
other cultures. And China is actually, I have a sister-in-law who's from China. And, when they go to China, it can control. They can't get out and just access everything, maybe more so than Russia is clamping down. But China is creating, like they always had the Zhengguo, center of the universe. So their name, means the center country. And so we are all biased. And I found numerous, I'm not saying that Google isn't, and it shows its own leanings toward US sources and not enough from other sources. But this is going to mean people are going to be acting in other countries thinking that they're in full command of all the facts, where their governments are also limiting outside sources. And so this is beyond TikTok. I mean, TikTok is ongoing, and I don't know, people can either access it or they can't, but these are bigger than just the TikTok. So are we going to be different universes, the Chinese info universe, the Russian, that's what I'm wondering about.
Yeah, my point is that already exists right now. It's not a new thing. And I think it's actually scarier because, so you're talking about a system that exists in China, they exist in their own universe. That kind of already exists because the information is very guarded. So the Chinese, for example, have their own equivalent of most social media. So Facebook, for example, is not allowed in China. They have, I think it's called WeChat or something. And so they live in that silo. I think the problem now is that, something like TikTok can be used to control people in the US to believe things that China wants them to believe, or to believe things that Russia wants them to believe, right? And so it's not just an external silo, but that we are creating silos even within ourselves.
Why is it better at that than Facebook, for instance?
Sorry, again?
Why is TikTok better at that than Facebook?
Because they have more powerful algorithms.
Oh, okay. I was not aware. See, these are kind of basic issues not all of us are aware. So TikTok is a more powerful platform than Facebook. If you're fakes or something,
Yeah, so they are different. TikTok and Facebook are different, but fundamentally, TikTok is known to have more powerful AI algorithms than Facebook does, right? Facebook has lots of issues. Meta has not been a very innovative company for a very long time, which is one of the reasons why Mark Zuckerberg is spending tons of money right now to get some of the top minds, because a lot of engineers in Silicon Valley, I've worked in Silicon Valley before, and Facebook was always thought of as not a real engineering company, right? And I think Mark Zuckerberg still has that inferiority complex from that, and that's why he's spending so much money, offering people millions and millions of dollars to come work for Meta, because he's trying to make Meta more powerful in the AI world, in the AI race. And so in case of TikTok, yes, they just have extremely powerful models. And I think that's one of the reasons why China will refuse to sell, will not agree to the sale of TikTok, just because of how powerful the company is in that respect.
There are some game companies that Russia has that are involved in having other tangential businesses, these computer wargaming companies, and maybe some of that will hook up with Yandex. I mean, are you aware of
Possibly? No, I'm not aware of that. No.
That's something, because Russia isn't going to want to be out of this. It's not going to want to have it a duo and we're out of it. So once there is a Yandex, and you don't hear as much about it, but it's worth reading up on because it is in the same race, so to speak.
Yeah, this is the first I'm hearing of it, actually, so I'll take a look at it.
Next.
I've used Yandex because sometimes the search, if you use Google or that, they're very they know how to kind of control the information and push their own narrative or the current Western narrative about high top of the answers.
Yeah.
And I compare them to Yandex sometimes. I go more straight to the answers. And health and politics and stuff like that. So.
Well, that's very new information then, because I had not heard anybody's personal. I was afraid to use Yandex. I'll tell you, this may be Cold War paranoia, but I thought, oh, is Russia going to put something in my computer if I try to use Yandex?
Well, I don't know if they put something on my computer,
Well,
but also
the-
Brave. I use Brave because, there is a lot of censorship going on, and Google has been in the forefront because it's the biggest company, in that. So but about TikTok, I think one of its successes because it's pioneered and popularized the short video
yeah.
format, and it caught everybody by surprise. And then, of course, the AI is extremely powerful, and they use that. But youngsters, just love the short videos. They come in, they're very well made. Somehow, it was a kind of an interesting environment, a whole platform that made them look good, made them reach a lot of people. It just happened, and it became an amazing phenomenon. For
Short videos are out on YouTube. Why is TikTok more popular than YouTube?
I think short videos on YouTube came as a response to TikTok.
Correct. Yeah, that was a response. Same thing with Instagram short videos as
Oh,
well,
okay.
was all a response to TikTok's popularity.
Well, that's interesting. See, I didn't know the order of these. I don't know how many of us did. You have to really be. Do you have any other comments on, the interface between these platforms, Tosi? Because you have kind of an overview.
What do you mean by the interface between
Well,
the
just,
platforms?
we were just learning. For me, this is all news, which one came first. And now you say you worked in Silicon Valley, and Meta was not considered a true, innovative AI kind of environment.
Yeah, I mean, so I think they have the potential. Meta has the potential to be the most powerful AI company because they have so much data about everyone, right? They have some of the most powerful platforms, Facebook, Instagram, even WhatsApp is owned by Meta. And so they have so much data, more data than I think any other company for that matter, that they can train their models on. And they've just not succeeded at coming out with the best product, the best AI-based product. And that's why they're spending so much money on that. But then again,
Maybe
it's going to
being
be
slow is a good thing. I didn't mean to cut you off, but maybe that's a good
Sorry.
thing. You're a little slow.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, I think I like the expression mendacious Fs, but then I think Mark Zuckerberg is is one as well. And I think it's a good thing. I think there's some good. So for example, Meta releases their AI models as open weights or quote unquote open source models. They're not exactly open source, but then they release the model such that you can run Meta's, their models are called Llama. So the equivalent to ChatGPT is Llama. You can run that privately on your own computer. I think that's a good thing because you can create an AI tool that does something specific if you care about privacy. So it doesn't go to some cloud server. Whereas if you use ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, you are sending your data to their servers, which means they can use your data for training. They can see your data, and they claim it's private, but then you have to trust them a lot, to actually.
Could you send us a short information on that alternative that you just mentioned?
I can. The problem is that it's very technical.
Oh,
So it's not
okay.
it's not something you can just download and use. It takes
Is
a
it
lot of
Linux
time.
or
Yeah.
something like that? Linux
So,
or some of the other.
I mean, it works on different platforms. It does work better on Linux in my experience. But then there's a process to downloading and getting it set up to actually work for you.
I
So,
see.
And that's why it will never, so I'm sorry, Llama, the
Llama.
most recent,
Oh, okay.
the most recent is Llama 4.
Hmm.
And it's supposed to be a very powerful model as well, but then again, it's not as, it's possible. So I have a lot of experience with it, so I'm able to use it personally, but then it's not as easy to use for other people.
Well, that's interesting for those among us, because there are a few in this audience or who will get this, who do have that kind of background and might be able to evaluate it for us.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to, we're getting on to about 90 minutes. So let's get any final questions or comments from any of you. There's some people who haven't said anything. Do you want to just make a comment of any kind? I'm waiting, folks. I know you're there. We always have this happen. Some people just, do all the talking. And I'm glad my friend Emily Ricketts is here for one, and Margaret Pecoraro. They're both, well, from Tucson, and very interested in the topic, I know. But if we have no one else who's eager to say anything, I'll just say, well, we're really grateful that you could come, and it will be up on YouTube shortly. As soon as I get it in my little hot hands, I will put it up there, and hopefully we will have you back, because you are the ever popular Tosi.
I'd love to be back. It's always fun to interact with you all.
Problems. All right. So Tosi, to your family and you, I hope you have a good rest of this holiday weekend, and have a good one.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.